Hey everyone, Nick here. Before we dive into the weirdness of that night, let's set the stage. I worked night shifts at this big old hotel right in the heartland of the Midwest. It was a good gig, decent pay, 10 minutes from my pad, and on most days, as chill as they come. Now, I'm not the kind to scare easy, but what I'm about to tell you still gets my skin crawling every time I think about it. This particular Tuesday started off like any other. It was one of those shifts where you just know it's going to be an easy ride. Few reservations, the steady hum of the air conditioning, and the kind of quiet that makes a large hotel feel like a ghost town. You'd think in a place like that, you'd get the creeps often, but nope, it was usually just the quiet retreat I needed from the chaos of everyday life. But that night, the quiet was a bit too quiet, even for me. You know, it's like the calm before a storm, or that eerie silence in a movie right before something jumps out at you. The hotel was halfway through some major renovations, especially on the third floor, which was directly under my watch. Rooms stripped down to the studs, wires hanging like jungle vines, and sheets of plastic that flapped like ghostly curtains every time the air shifted. No guests were booked on that floor because, well, who wants to sleep in a construction zone? So there I was around 10 p.m., kicking back with a cold coffee from earlier, flipping through a magazine, just keeping one ear open for the phone or the ding of a late arrival. That's when the phone did ring, and I remember looking at the caller ID, blinking a few times because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Room 323. Now I had walked that floor at the start of my shift, and let me tell you, it was as deserted as a ghost town. Tools and tarps, but no people. Room 323 especially was a mess. Floorboards up, no furniture but a lone lamp standing oddly in the corner, like it forgot to leave with the rest of the room's belongings. I answered the phone, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet lobby. "Front desk, this is Nick. How can I help?" There was a pause on the other end, long enough for me to wonder if it was just a glitch. But then, a cough, like someone clearing the dust from their throat. "Hello? Oh, sorry, how are you?" The voice was timid, a woman's, tinged with a hesitation that you don't expect in a place like this. Her question threw me off. It's not what you hear from someone staying in a non-existent room. "I'm fine, thanks. And yourself?" I replied, already standing, ready to head up there because this had to be a mistake or a prank. "Well, not too good actually," she said, and her tone, let me tell you, it shifted from timid to worried in a heartbeat. There was a realness to her worry that caught me off guard. This wasn't a prank call. It was something else. Something off. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything particular I can help you with?" I asked, already pulling up the room's details on the computer. Just as I thought, the room was marked out of service. No bookings, no nothing. "I'm not sure. Maybe," she continued, her voice a mix of confusion and fear. "I'm in room 323, and you're right. I need help." The way she said it, like she was realizing her situation right there on the call, sent a chill down my spine. Room 323 was supposed to be empty, a hollow shell waiting for a new coat of paint and a fresh carpet. But here was this woman claiming she was inside, needing help. It was my job to look into it, no matter how much every instinct told me something was very, very wrong. Armed with nothing but my master key and a flimsy flashlight I borrowed from the maintenance cart, I made my way to the third floor. You know that feeling when you're about to do something you know you probably shouldn't, but the pull of curiosity, or maybe duty in my case, is just too strong? That was me, stepping into the elevator, pressing the button for the third floor, and feeling the old cables groan as we ascended. The light in the elevator flickered, which wasn't unusual but felt ominously timed tonight. The doors slid open with a shudder, and I stepped out into the third-floor hallway. It was like stepping onto a different planet. The usual plush carpets and warmly lit corridors of the lower floors were replaced by cold, bare concrete and sparse, flickering bulbs that did little more than cast deep shadows. Construction equipment lay abandoned along the walls, creating odd shapes and silhouettes that my mind couldn't help but morph into lurking figures as I passed by. The air was thick with the smell of fresh paint and sawdust, mingling oddly with a faint, musty odor that seemed out of place. I walked cautiously, the beam from my flashlight cutting a narrow path through the darkness ahead. Every sound seemed amplified, a distant drip of water, the creak of what might have been a loose floorboard, or the rustle of the plastic sheeting that hung like curtains separating the under-construction rooms from the hallway. As I approached room 323, the air grew noticeably cooler. I chalked it up to the AC vents being exposed due to the renovations, but part of me couldn't shake the feeling that it was something else, something less mundane. I paused a moment listening. That's when I first heard it, the faint sound of music. It was so soft at first that I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Jazz, from the 1920s or thereabouts, the kind of music you'd expect in a black and white film. Set in a smoky speakeasy, not a Midwestern hotel under renovation. I moved closer to room 323, the music growing slightly louder as I did. It was coming from inside the room, all right. How? There was no electricity in that part of the floor. All the wiring was supposed to be dead until the new fixtures were installed. The melody was slow, a mournful trumpet solo weaving through a piano accompaniment, the notes hanging heavy in the air as if reluctant to fade away. My hand hovered over the handle of room 323, hesitating. The red light that seeped out from under the door painted my shoes a sinister shade as I stood there, trying to muster the courage to go in. It wasn't just the light or the music that unnerved me. It was the whole situation. Rooms don't just light up and play music in a gutted part of a hotel. Something was off. Very off. Taking a deep breath, I pressed my ear against the door, listening for any sign of the woman who had called. Instead, all I could focus on was the bizarre soundtrack of a bygone era playing behind the door, as if the room itself was lost in time, stuck in a loop of its own haunted history. The air around me felt charged, tense, as if the very atmosphere was waiting for me to turn the knob. With a shaky hand, I finally keyed in the master code and pushed the door open, bracing myself for whatever lay beyond that eerie glow. As the door creaked open, the sliver of red light that had been trickling out from the bottom spilled over like a flood, washing over my shoes and climbing up my legs. I paused for a moment, steeling myself against the chill that darted up my spine like a spider, scrambling across cold concrete. That red light, unnaturally vivid and oddly pulsating, shouldn't have been there. Not here, not in this under-construction void that was room 323. The music, that jazzy, melancholic tune from the 1920s, now filled the air, wrapping around me like a thick, tangible fog. It was surreal, like stepping into a speakeasy from another time, one hidden behind the facade of this modern hotel. As my eyes adjusted to the unexpected illumination, the source of the red light became clear. It was a single bulb, draped with a tattered crimson scarf, swinging gently from a wire overhead. The effect was both mesmerizing and terrifying, casting wavering shadows that danced along the stripped walls and bare floor. Now fully inside, I took in the room's state. It was a chaos of renovation, plastic sheeting draped like ghostly curtains, piles of plaster on the floor, and amid it all, an old-fashioned gramophone sat on a dust-covered table, its horn a silent herald to the eerie soundtrack of the night. How it played with no visible power source was a mystery that dug its claws deeper into my already frayed nerves. I ventured further in, the music guiding me as if it were a siren song. Each step felt heavier than the last, my feet dragging as if the room itself was urging me to turn back. Yet, forward I went, driven by a mix of duty and the unnerving need to understand who, or what, had called me here. To my left, a large mirror stood leaning against the wall, its surface streaked with dust except for a single clear handprint in the center. Seeing this human mark in the dust felt oddly comforting until I realized that the handprint was much smaller than any adult's could be. A child's handprint in this desolated place? The thought was chilling, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow flicker in the reflection, just beyond my own. I whipped around, flashlight darting across the room's corners, but there was nothing. only the shifting shapes made by the red light and my own heightened imagination. Then, from the corner of the room, under the draped plastic, came a soft rustling sound, like whispers, or perhaps the brush of fabric. My heart lodged firmly in my throat as I approached, flashlight beam trembling along with my hands. I reached out, pulling the plastic aside with a swift tug, half expecting to unveil some hidden horror. But there was nothing. Only the empty, echoing space of the room and the plaintive wail of the trumpet from the gramophone. As the initial adrenaline faded, replaced by a creeping dread, I turned to the gramophone, intent on stopping the haunting music. My hand hovered over the arm, hesitating as the trumpet hit a particularly sorrowful note. Finally, I lowered the arm, cutting off the music with a soft click. Silence fell heavy and immediate, so dense I could almost feel it settling on my shoulders. The abrupt quiet was as startling as the music had been, a stark, hollow absence that seemed to press against my ears. I stood there, the only sound now the ragged draw of my own breaths, trying to piece together the surreal puzzle of this night. Just as I resolved to leave, convinced more than ever that this was all some bizarre trick or misunderstanding, the phone on the wall, old and disconnected or so I thought, rang sharply, slicing through the silence with its shrill bell. My blood ran cold. That phone shouldn't work. It couldn't. Yet there it was, insistently ringing, demanding to be answered. With a hand that trembled despite my best efforts to remain calm, I reached out and picked up the receiver. As I picked up the receiver, my mind raced through every possible explanation. Pranks, glitches, maybe even a setup by my coworkers. But as the cold plastic touched my ear, the room felt as if it had dropped 10 degrees, and I knew deep down that none of those rational theories could explain the dread seeping into my bones. Hello? My voice was barely above a whisper, but in the dense silence of room 323, it echoed like a shout. The voice that came through the speaker was not the panicked woman's from before, but that of a man, calm and unsettlingly cheerful. "Ah, finally. We thought you'd never pick up." I stiffened, the friendly tone so out of place it was almost sinister. "Who is this? How are you calling on a disconnected phone?" The chuckle that followed was light but carried a dark undertone. "Oh, the lines here are a bit old-fashioned, but effective, wouldn't you say?" My grip on the receiver tightened, a mixture of fear and anger building within me. "Look, I don't know what's going on here, but..." The man cut me off, his voice suddenly stern. "Room 323 needs to be taken care of, Nick. It's not like the others. It remembers." "It remembers? What are you talking about?" I demanded. But the line crackled, and his voice softened again, returning to that unnerving cheerfulness. "Just look around, Nick, you'll see." I hesitated, then slowly turned, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing in the room with me. But there was only the empty room, the shadows now seeming to loom larger in the absence of the red light and music. I scanned the area, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Then my eyes caught something on the wall opposite the mirror, a series of faded marks, scratches that hadn't been there before. They were deliberate, forming jagged letters, HELP. A chill ran down my spine. "What is this?" I whispered into the phone, though I wasn't sure I wanted an answer. "You're seeing it now, aren't you? The room is special. It keeps memories, feelings, fears," the man said, his voice a murmur that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" My voice was firm, but inside I was reeling. "We just want to be remembered," he replied, then added with a hint of a sigh, "Don't forget about us, Nick." Before I could respond, the line went dead, leaving me with a deafening silence and a heart pounding against my ribcage. I hung up the phone, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. "Remembered?" I muttered to myself, looking back at the scratches on the wall. As I did, the room seemed to grow colder, the edges of my vision blurring slightly, as if the very air was thickening. Taking a deep breath, I resolved to leave, to get out of this room that was becoming more oppressive by the second. As I turned towards the door, ready to make a quick exit, I heard it again. the sound of the gramophone needle dropping, the mournful jazz music resuming as if on cue. I froze, the eerie melody twisting around me, pulling me back into the room's chilling embrace. "Come on in, boy, we don't bite," that cheery male voice called out again, no longer just from the phone but seemingly from the air itself. The invitation, accompanied by a low, rolling chuckle, echoed through the room, bouncing off the bare walls and filling the space with a sound that was far from welcoming. Heart racing, I faced the room one last time, the red light flickering back to life, casting eerie shadows that danced mockingly around me. The atmosphere was charged, heavy with an unspoken history that clung to the very walls of room 323. The room was alive, in its way, a repository of unspoken stories and forgotten tragedies, and I was an unwilling witness to its spectral echoes. With every ounce of courage I could muster, I stepped back, my eyes locked on the door as the chuckle turned into a maniacal laugh, the sound spiraling into madness. I knew then that no rational explanation could account for what I was experiencing, and the only option left was to escape this nightmare. The laughter boomed around me, morphing into a cacophony of echoes that seemed to mock my every step as I made my desperate retreat. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me swiftly towards the door, but with each step, the room seemed to stretch further and further away, like a nightmare where escape is just beyond grasp. As I finally reached the door, the room abruptly fell silent again, the sudden quiet more terrifying than the haunting laughter. I fumbled with the doorknob, my hands slick with cold sweat. The metal felt unnaturally cold, the chill biting into my skin as I swung the door wide open and spilled into the dimly lit hallway. I didn't stop to look back. The hallway, once an eerie passage of shadows and whispers, now felt like a sanctuary in comparison to the oppressive atmosphere of room 323. My heart hammered against my chest as I half ran, half stumbled towards the stairs, the sound of my own rapid breathing loud in my ears. Reaching the stairwell, I paused for a moment, leaning against the cool wall to catch my breath. The air here was clearer, free of the musty, suffocating presence that had filled room 323. I wiped my forehead, trying to steady my shaking hands, and took a deep breath, trying to center myself. "It's just a room," I muttered under my breath, though the events of the last hour clashed loudly against this feeble attempt at rationalization. I descended the stairs, each step echoing in the empty stairwell, a stark reminder of the hotel's nighttime stillness. When I reached the lobby, the familiar sights of the front desk and the dimly lit chandeliers offered some comfort. But the normalcy of it all felt surreal, like stepping back into a world that didn't, or couldn't, understand the fear I had just experienced. Back at the front desk, I slumped into the chair, my mind reeling. I glanced at the clock. Barely an hour had passed since the phone call from room 323, yet it felt like an entire night had been compressed into that brief, terrifying span. I tried to focus on the mundane tasks of organizing reservation papers, anything to keep my mind occupied and away from the haunting images and sounds that lingered at the edges of my consciousness. That's when I noticed it. The envelope on the counter marked room 323. My hands trembled as I reached for it, half expecting another eerie trick. Inside, the keycard was returned, but it was the note on the back of the envelope that caught my attention. Scrawled in a hurried, almost frantic hand were the words, "Maybe next time." The message chilled me to the bone. Next time? My voice echoed faintly in the empty lobby. The implication that there would be a next time, that whatever resided in room 323 wasn't finished, sent a new wave of dread washing over me. I sat back trying to process everything. Had it been a warning? A threat? Or simply the ramblings of something that couldn't let go of the living world? The questions swirled in my head, unanswered and unsettling. If you've stuck with me this far, thanks for listening. It's not every day you encounter something that defies explanation. A real-life haunting, if you will. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more tales like this. And hey, if you've had a brush with the paranormal, drop a comment below. Let's share these stories. After all, there's some comfort in knowing you're not the only one who's seen things that are hard to explain. Until next time, keep the lights on and maybe, just maybe, steer clear of room 323.